And so we've invited several folks from the Tennessee Department of Health, Tennessee Department of Revenue, and Tennessee Department of Agriculture to try to answer as many questions as we can answer in an hour. I do want to remind you, we'll leave participant video and microphones off. That helps to decrease bandwidth for folks with not so great internet service and to decrease distractions. We will use the chat box. So if you have questions for our regulators, please feel free to put them in. I will note that we will not be able to answer every question. These gentlemen know a lot that we have with us today, but they do not cover every regulation in the state or at the federal government. So we will definitely do our best to answer all that we can. I do want to cover a few ground rules based on what we've experienced in the past to make this session as productive as possible. So I will remind you, this is an educational session. So we are going to be talking about and trying to answer questions related to regulations for farmers markets the best that we know how. But we're not going to debate whether those regulations should be the way they are. Nobody here makes those regulations. We have several gentlemen who try to enforce them to the best of their ability. If you're interested in changing the regulations, then you need to visit with your legislators about that. There are some questions we can't answer. There are rules that are still being put together for hemp and CBD products, so we don't know what those will be exactly yet. And we're also had some questions submitted about rabbit and quail, and that's a hot topic. There's also a Tennessee Meat Act that's going through legislature right now that will perhaps help make some of those regulations clearer if you're only marketing meat within the state of Tennessee. If you're marketing out across state lines, then our office may be able to help you with some information about those later. So I'm going to start by having each of our panelists introduce themselves and tell a little bit about their role and the topics that they may be able to answer questions. And then we will dive into some questions that were submitted last week to get the ball rolling, and then I will watch the chat and try to add any follow-up questions and other questions that we may have throughout the hour session. So let's go in order, gentlemen. I've got you in alphabetical order here. Mel, would you introduce yourself and tell us your role at the Tennessee Department of Health and kind of the topics that will be relevant today from your perspective?
Hey, I'm Mel. I am the food program manager for the Department of Health, but the Division of Environmental Health. And I help manage the food service program. We regulate restaurants, food trucks, and farmers market food units.
Great. Thank you for being here. Billy?
Well, hello, everybody. This is Billy Trout with the Department of Revenue, the fine folks in the tax area. So we appreciate the opportunity with UT Ag and you good folks to be with you today. We're going to talk about sales tax a little bit and also maybe a couple of issues on business tax and some other things regarding farming. And we appreciate what all of our agricultural community does out there for us across the state. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
We appreciate you taking the time, Billy. And Danny?
I am Danny Withers. I'm the Director of Food Safety at the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. We'll talk about dairy, we can talk about produce, retail food stores, we can talk about manufactured foods, and we can talk about the Food Freedom Act. Now, I don't regulate the Food Freedom Act, but I am more than happy to talk to you about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Danny. Danny covers a lot of areas in his sector for sure. So we appreciate you being here. I'm also really excited to have Dr. Mark Morgan from the Department of Food Science joining in today. And Mark may weigh in as well if he sees a question that he could add to. But I did want Mark to share for sure, introduce himself and tell a little bit about what his team can offer for food manufacturers in the state.
Thanks, Megan. Hi, I'm Mark Morgan from the Department of Food Science here at UT, and we help any food business people, entrepreneurs, or established people working under the Food Freedom Act or commercial processing with process authority work. So if you're making a product and you want to know if it's going to be shelf stable or if it's safe to produce, we try to help answer those questions. And we do testing for pH or water activity of products. We can do process letters for acidified foods and formulated acid products and things like that. So we're here to help. We're not the regulators, but I will give you my interpretation of what the regulations are and then forward you to the folks at the associated departments to get the actual answer.
Thank you so much, Mark. Your team plays a really important role in helping food manufacturers make sure their products are safe, and we all definitely want that to happen. That makes for a better environment for everybody. All right. Well, let's jump in here to some of the questions that were submitted through the online forum earlier this week that are relevant for our panelists today. So sampling can be a very effective means of sharing your product and enticing people to purchase. Would you please discuss the requirements for offering a sample or a taste test of various types of products in the market? And we know that can be a wide variety of products. So that could be fresh produce or baked goods, meats or cheeses, jams or jellies, or even some dairy products. Mel, is that one up your alley?
Partially up my alley.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah. So
We'll let you start.
Okay, yeah. So under the House Bill 1077, they wrote into the Farmers Market Food Bill that sampling is sampling at a farmer's market, you are not required to obtain a license or a permit to offer samples. And the requirements for that are the samples must be prepared on clean surfaces. Food must be in good and sound condition, free from spoilage, filth, or other contamination. Food must be honestly presented and safe for human consumption. Cut produce should be discarded after 2 hours. Persons preparing or dispensing samples must wash their hands frequently or have and use disposable gloves. A barrier must be maintained between hands and food, so no bare hand contact with the food. And sneeze guards or plastic or glass coverings are required to protect the food from when. Can I get louder? Can you guys not hear me?
A little bit. I had to turn my volume up, but.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, do you want me to repeat it?
I think I could hear fine. Could you hear Brian? Okay, very good. Try to adjust your volumes, and then if that doesn't work, okay, it's just a little quiet. All right, great. I think you don't have to repeat it. You can go on from there.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's really what's written into the law. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add to that.
Danny, is there anything from your perspective that would add to the Department of Health perspective on sampling, or is that all in their court?
So it's basically all in their court. The only concern that we would have would be the sampling of dairy. You can't sample raw and pasteurized milk. It has to be sold via a herd share. So that would be the only place that we would step in.
Great point. Wonderful. All right, that's nice because we used to have to follow Department of Health like food service rules for sampling. So this makes it more possible to do. And certainly there's some rules to follow, but makes it easier. All right, our next question. What types of manufactured food products are allowed to be produced in a private residence and sold within the state of Tennessee at farmers markets under the Tennessee Food Freedom Act?
So that will fall underneath me since we do the bulk of the talking. First of all, if you have any questions on the Food Freedom Act, simply just do a Google search for the Tennessee Food Freedom Act. Our webpage is the first one that pops up. There's a ton of information there. I can't give you an extensive list of everything that can be sold underneath the Food Freedom Act, but as long as the end product does not require refrigeration for food safety, it does not contain meat, those items are able to be sold under the Food Freedom Act.
Great. So things that are non-temperature controlled, non-dairy, non-meat, no pickled eggs.
Yep.
Other than that, most things that don't have to be cold.
Correct.
Or hot. Great. A couple of follow-up questions. What are the labeling requirements for products produced under the Tennessee Food Freedom Act?
Sure. So it has to have the producer name. That's either your given name or the business name. It has to have the home address and phone number of where the product is made. I didn't make that rule. Now that's what they put in there. It has to have the home address and phone number. It has to have the common name of the food. It has to have the ingredients listed in decreasing order of prominence. That's going to be, and all sub-ingredients. So if you're making a chocolate chip cookie and you list cocoa or a cocoa chocolate chip and it has sub-ingredients, those have to be declared as well. And any allergens have to be declared as well. It has to have the required disclaimer that this product was produced at a private residence that is exempt from state licensing and inspection, and that this product may contain allergens. That is all that's required to be on the label.
Great. So we have a couple of follow-up questions in the chat. I'll go ahead and get to right now. How about regular pickles? Can you do that under the Food Freedom Act?
Yep, as long as the end item does not require refrigeration.
Great. Okay, this is one we've had a little bit. What about things like vanilla extract? Because there's alcohol used in that.
Yeah, you have to be careful of the alcohol content there. You're going to have it tested for the alcohol content. If it's above a certain level, it falls out from underneath this and will fall under the alcohol board. They would have to make the decision on what needs to be done with that.
Great. Does anybody, and Mark, you may know this, or Danny, you may as well. How does one test for the alcohol content?
Yeah, that I do not know.
All right. Good question. We'll have to look up what level is legal and how to get that tested. Are there any limitations on sales of these products other than at farmers markets?
The way the law is written, they're allowed to be sold at any location within the state of Tennessee. That includes retail food stores, farmers markets, and grocery stores. The health department currently does not allow the sale of these items for use in restaurants, but they're allowed for sale pretty much anywhere inside the state of Tennessee as long as you don't cross state lines.
Great, Mel. I had a question the other day I'm going to throw in here. So what about if somebody is catering, can they use those items, or is that considered food service and they're not allowed to use those either?
If they're a permitted food service establishment, they cannot use it.
Okay.
It's not considered an approved source.
Excellent. So any food service is permitted. Great. All right. Well, that kind of leads into our next question, Mel. When does a vendor need a farmers market food unit permit? What is that permit and when does somebody need them?
Okay, so you need a farmer's market food unit permit if you meet the definition of food service. And really what the definition of food service is any place or location where food or a beverage is taken out of the original container, prepared and served to the public, regardless if there's a whether there's a charge for the food or beverage. So I guess if you meet that definition, you're a food service establishment. But at a farmer's market, if you wanted to cook up cheeseburgers and sell to someone at the farmer's market, you'd have to get a farmer's market food unit permit. Or if you wanted to make lemonade on site at the farmer's market and serve lemonade to someone, you would have to get a farmer's market food unit permit. Does that answer the question? That's
I think so.
Okay.
Yes, and one gets that through their county Department of Health, is that correct?
Yeah, you can contact your local health department and they'll issue you an online application that you can fill out to apply for it. And we'll help you through that process to obtain a permit.
Great. And what does that permit cost?
It costs $300 annually.
And that year runs,
It runs July 1st to June 30th every year. So if we permitted you right now, you'd pay a prorated half-year fee and it would expire at the end of June. And you'd have to renew and pay the full $300 to continue operating from July 1st on forward through the next year.
so the permitting runs on the state fiscal year, July
Yeah.
1 through June 30. Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Checking to see, Danny has put some information in the chat about vanilla extracts and vanilla flavors. Thank you with the alcohol content. And I don't see any follow-up questions about the food unit permit. So we will move on, although we can circle back later if we need to. Billy, I think we're gonna put you on the hot seat for a little bit here. When would I need a business license to sell products at the farmers markets?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a very easy question to answer. It depends on really who you are. So let's assume, first of all, that you're a farmer or you're someone that's producing the products. So if you are the producer of that product, you don't need a business license because you're selling the product at the farm or the nursery that you're creating your product from. So you don't need a business license. And it really doesn't matter where you're selling it from. If you're selling it on the farm, at a farmer's market, anywhere you want to be. So you're good there as far as that goes. Now, the obverse of that is, what if you're not the producer? What if you're someone else that has acquired products from a farmer to sell? Well, then you're a lot like a store, a retail store. So you would need to have a business license and perhaps pay business tax. There's some complexities to that. I won't get too deep into that, but there could be an opportunity there for licensing as far as that goes for those people too. One other thing that's kind of interesting, we bring up things like people who sell livestock, things of that nature for other people. So if you've got somebody that is operating a livestock auction barn or something like that, they're actually do have to have a business license as a classification for business. One other kind of funny thing to talk about that we occasionally bring up is catfish farmers. Actually, in the law is written that catfish farmers are exempt from business tax. I don't know why they wrote it in the law, but it's in the law. So if you're out there raising those catfish, you're totally good because that is in the actual law. How about that?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So what you were mentioning refers to kind of produce, raw produce, fruits and vegetables, nursery products without any fancy pot or anything like that.
Right.
Now, that changes a little bit though with some value-added manufactured food products.
True. Yeah. So let's go down that road for a second. So we
Great.
get that question quite a bit. I think somebody put it in chat earlier too, and it's a great question. So under state law, if you're producing these raw products that you just mentioned, you're good, right? But a lot of times people want to sell them with something else. Okay. So state law allows for water, sugar, salt, and pectin to be added to these farm raised products, and it's still okay to sell. So that sounds a lot like jams and jellies to me. Okay. So you're good on that. But when you have other types of additives to that product, or you're selling it along with some other type of product, then you're going to enter into a taxable situation for sales tax purposes. Okay. So, the example we give a lot is an apple versus an apple pie. Okay. An apple, if you grew an apple and you sell it, that's not subject to sales tax or business tax, right? But if you're selling an apple pie, it's a lot like buying an apple pie down at the bakery, and that's very much subject to tax. Okay. So there's your difference right there.
Great. Some other examples we use, if you make strawberry jam, you've got sugar and pectin and strawberries in it. If you grew all the strawberries, that's sales tax exempt, but you want to get fancy and add some cinnamon in there. All of a sudden, you may need a business license if you sell $3,000 or more of products. Something
Right.
that we find trips up our meat producers sometimes is they're selling meat from animals they grow, except maybe they'll have the processor make sausage and then they add in herbs that didn't come from their farm. Well, all of a sudden, that product then is subject to business license and sales tax and those thresholds, or adding chocolate to milk for our dairy producers. So those intricacies there
Right.
is what keeps you and me in job security, Billy.
Right. Gotcha.
All right. So kind of similarly, let's go down the sales tax road. Would I need to collect or remit sales tax to sell any of my products at farmers markets?
So typically you don't really need to do that, because the law allows you to not have to do the sales tax unless you are in acquiring products that you didn't raise. So let me give you an example. So let's say that you have a farm and you've raised all kinds of vegetables and things like that over the summer, and you sell them on the farm or at a farmer's market or whatever. So if 50% or more of your agricultural products are stuff that you actually grew, then you can sell those products and any products that you acquire otherwise and not have to collect sales tax. So that's a pretty nice little thing in the law. So you're good. You don't have to have a sales tax number. You don't have to have a business tax license either, or any of that stuff. So you're all good as far as that goes. Now, where it gets a little complicated is if you were under that 50%. So let's say that most of what you sell is now not what you grew, but it's what you acquired from someone else. Well, what the law says is that you have to pay sales tax on the items that you acquired, still not what you grew, but what you've acquired. So you have to kind of segment that. So if you have a farmer's market or you're selling from the farm and you are selling corn and who knows what else, tomatoes and things like that that you grew, and then but you make more than half of your money in selling pineapples. Well, most of y'all probably know you can't raise a pineapple in Tennessee, not that I know of, and y'all know more than I would, but I don't think so. So if you made more money on that, you'd be paying tax on the sale of the pineapples, okay, but not on your corn and your tomatoes, etc. Okay, there you go.
Great. And then those value added products is the same, kind of the same as before. If you're buying any adding anything in other than water, sugar, salt, pectin, and preservatives, then you've got to collect your sales tax.
Right, and record keeping is really important too. And we're not really talking about this too much today, but for agritourism and things of that nature, you've got a sort of a complex situation. Sales to like hay rides and, corn mazes and things of that nature, those are taxable under sales tax, specifically an amusement tax, which is basically equivalent to the sales tax. Okay. So those are subject to that. But when you get involved in events like that, you can be selling a myriad of different things out there. You might have hot chocolate. You might have raw pumpkins from the field. Those are exempt, right? But you might have who knows what else, that you can sell this. So there's elements of that are taxable and some that are not taxable. So when you're selling tickets or selling items, you want to be very careful about what you're collecting or not collecting tax on, and just make sure that you're keeping good records of it. That way, if someone audits you for some odd reason, you'll say, okay, here's my things that are exempt, and here's what I collected tax on.
Great, and I think that answers a question that came into the chat about supporting documents. It's not necessarily something that you download from the Department of Revenue side.
Mhm.
It's your production and purchase records and other records that you keep to show how much you produced
Mhm.
and what you purchased and sold as well.
That's right, exactly.
Mhm. All right. Is this only applicable to sales made at a farmer's market, or will this apply on sales made on our website as well?
Yeah, the type of item being sold is an important thing. So online sales would be equivalent to sales made in person. So yeah, absolutely. Same rules would apply.
Yep.
Now, of
Or on
course,
farm or anywhere else. Yeah.
that's exactly right now too. Now, and one other thing, just not to complicate this among many different complexity things, but if you do sell to someone online, um, a lot of times your sales could be for sales from out of state. So if you're selling something that would normally be taxable, um, for whatever reason, say it's a value added product or something, and you sell it to someone who doesn't live in Tennessee, you do not collect Tennessee tax on that because that's a sale in interstate commerce. That applies to every business in this state. In fact, the other states work the same way as well. So there's a federal law that prevents the taxation of people that don't live here. Okay. So, or where that customer is located outside of our state.
Okay. But they may have to collect sales tax for that other state.
Possibly, it depends on the rules that the other states have. So you want to be real careful about that. So you would probably want to check on that. But honestly, folks, that you're talking about people that are probably you're pretty big operation if you're doing a lot of that stuff. So yeah, you probably want to get either really knowledgeable yourself or perhaps, have the services of a CPA or somebody that's, more heavily engaged in that kind of thing too, to help you along. Cause that can get complex pretty quick. Okay.
Talking about the scale there, is it still that you've got to if you collect your sales tax when you have $4,800 in sales or more? So if you're only making, a couple $100 or $3,000 worth of sales of taxable products, you don't need to collect sales tax, but only you hit that $4,800 mark.
Absolutely. The $400 a month or $4,800 a year is your threshold that you're looking at when you're in Tennessee. So if you're a business of any type, including agricultural or any business, the same threshold applies. So we're not very interested in people that do smaller than that to have to worry about sales tax. It's not in our best interest or really your best interest either.
Excellent. So we're going to let's see. My farm has a business license. What are my sales and use tax form submission requirements?
Okay, well, that is two things wrapped all in the same thing, which is sort of weird. Uh, First of all, your farm has a business license. Don't really know why, but you could. You don't really have to. Um, as we talked about before, most farms don't have business licenses unless you're engaged in some other kind of taxable activity. But if you are, I would say we need to determine which kind of business license you have. state law changed in 2023 that says if your business makes less than $100,000 a year, then you do not have to have a tax paying business tax account. You can just get a minimal activity license. If you're over that amount, then you need a standard business license and you have to pay business tax. Now, again, I say all this to say and remind you one more time that it is very unusual for a farm to even have a business license. So the person asking this question, you may want to check on that, maybe give us a call, maybe send us an email or something, and let us follow up on that for you, because we don't want you to have to endure any expense that's not necessary. Okay. So check into that too. Now, what are my sales and use tax form submission requirements? Well, that's a very open-ended question, and we don't have that much time. But I will say, uh, online on our 10-tap system, when you're registered for sales tax, we'll typically set people up on a monthly reporting basis, requiring a monthly report, even if there's no sales to report for a particular month. So that's the general answer to your question there too.
And those levels, $100,000, that would be gross income, correct? And not
Yes,
net.
yes,
Yes,
for the
gross.
business tax, that is the gross, and because business tax is a gross receipts tax, it is not a net profit tax, if that makes any difference or any sense rather.
Excellent questions. Excellent questions. David, I'm going to let you follow up with Billy directly about the question you have about consignment sales in your store, because that's not exactly farmers market related. Unless we have time at the end, we'll circle back, but we're going to try to stick to farmers market specific questions today. And that one gets a little more complicated as well. So I'm not ignoring you. We're just kind of pushing you down the road a little bit. Okay, so do you have to have some kind of tax number to have a small business that sells at farmers market?
No, not really. You sure don't. Now, I will say that operators of farmers markets and other types of shows and things like that, sometimes they have certain requirements, and that it would be up to the event host as to what those requirements might be. I'm remembering this off the top of my head, something I saw on the news one time. The farmers market in Nashville, I believe that as of a few years ago, they started requiring that only people who produce these items can participate at the farmers market, as opposed to someone going to a produce house and buying a bunch of fruits and vegetables and bringing them out there to sell. So that is not a Department of Revenue thing at all. Nothing like that. No number per se on that. But maybe, there could be some other regulations locally by the operator or the city or the county, but not from our perspective at the Department of Revenue.
Certainly, if your small business needs a business license, you'll have something associated with that. You'll have a number that you submit your income taxes under, and if you're a sole proprietorship, that might be your own social security number, or you could get an employee identification number for that. If you have some sort of other kind of business structure, you'll have some sort of number specifically for that, but that's kind of out of our realm a little bit today. Beyond that. Okay. So produce or manufactured food products or even handmade items, I would like to be a business so I can use my tax ID to not pay wholesale taxes for farm purchases like seed, etc. So this might be twofold for farm purchases and then other maybe ingredients for that apple pie, Billy, or that jam. How can they go about doing that?
Yeah, so it all comes down to tax registration. So let's use for better terms and not apples and oranges. So let's say that you're talking again about selling things that you are going to have to pay tax on. Let's say that for whatever reason, have some sort of tax obligation to collect sales tax, like on value-added products or something like that, or even, things that you might operate at maybe an agritourism thing. Well, when you acquire things that you're going to resell, under state law, you can buy them with a resale certificate that we provide when you register with us, so that you can take that to your supplier and say, hey, don't charge me sales tax on this stuff. I'm going to resell it. And there's some documentation requirements. Besides that, it's pretty easy. They're very used to that kind of thing. And you can acquire that. And again, these are for things that you resell, not for things that you use in your business, because those would not be able to be bought tax-free. You should not do that. Okay. Now, the other end of that, it sort of relates to the exemption that's available out there for items that you are selling that are truly exempt from sales tax. So, if that's the case, then you don't want to collect sales tax on that too. Now, getting back to the seeds and the other things of that nature, well, that is the state law provides farmers and nursery operators and timber harvesters the opportunity to buy lots of different things that are involved in your operation, and you not having to pay sales tax on them. Things like tractors and seed and even building supplies for barns that you are constructing yourself. So there's some real tax advantages out there. So you want to make the application for that exemption for those things that you're buying for your operation, and make sure that you do that whenever you get the opportunity to do, sooner than later, by the way, and make sure that you have a current copy of that with you when you're buying these qualifying products.
Great. Very helpful. Danny, this may be a little bit out of your area, but we have a question about scales and NTEP approved scales that are necessary for selling product by weight. Do you know where those scales can be purchased?
I do not. I would hate to try to guess, but I just don't. I don't even know what the abbreviation stands for, that acronym stands for. So no, I do not.
Sorry about that. That's in the
No
weights
problem.
and measures section of
That's
the
correct.
Consumer and Industry Services at the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. So that's out of his realm a little bit. But yes, if you're selling product by weight at a farmer's markets, you do have to use approved scales. Though do not have to be licensed by TDA anymore. They do have to weigh accurately, however. And if you search online for NTEP approved scales, you can find those. And Jody's putting in the chat, webstront.com is one source of those scales. So thanks, Jody, for adding that. And if anybody else has other places where they may have found those scales or seen them online, that would be great. All right, here's a produce safety training question. Do you have to complete the food safety training for microgreens if you are selling on a very small scale, such as under $25,000 and only at a rural farmer's market?
So if you're under that dollar value, typically you do not, as long as it's just a one cut. So if it's cut just during the harvesting, you typically do not. If you do any further processing, it would be required to be permitted through us. I'll post a link, a couple of links here that go to our produce safety rule in the chat. There's a flyer that will help you determine if you need to be covered by produce safety rule, and then just our general page. Honestly, with microgreens, sprouts, those types of things, it's probably best just to give us a quick call, and we'll talk you through it to make sure that if you have to be covered or not.
Excellent. And Liz, if you're still listening, I'm going to give you an assignment if you if you will help. We have a new microgreens publication, or a publication about the regulatory considerations for microgreens, sprouts, and baby greens. available through Extension. And we worked with Danny and his team at the Department of Ag, and Mark took a look at it as well to help us make sure we had some food safety information correct, and with our food safety department to get that written, and hopefully that will be helpful to folks on the microgreens realm. Excellent. So we have about 15 minutes left, and we are through my list of previously submitted questions. So if you have additional questions that Mel, Billy, and Danny may be able to answer, this would be a great time to submit those, and we will address those for as long as we can. And Mark, thank you for weighing in that Amazon has those scales as well. So they should be pretty easy to find online. I'm going to go back through the chat here. And I don't know, gentlemen, if there's anything in this legislative session too that's coming up that we ought to keep our eyes on that might cause changes to that. So we have questions about topical products made from products grown. So those are not food products. Those are not anything here that these gentlemen will have information on. My office, particularly Elena Boyd, is working on regulations for soaps and then lotions and cosmetics, learning about those. So we can connect you with Elena if that's up that alley, for skincare and those types of things. We can connect offline for those. There are some regulations for soaps and cosmetics, and there's even more regulations that are stricter and more intensive if anything seems to be a drug. And sometimes people try to make a medical claim or use a medical type word in those on those products. And you want to be careful of that because it sends you into a whole new realm of regulations there. And certainly then the business tax and sales tax license would fall into place with those, when you're adding things in that are not grown on the farm, or water, sugar, salt, pectin, and preservatives. So I do have a question. Somebody asked me recently if vinegar would be considered a preservative as it relates to business tax and sales tax, and that may take two of you to answer. I don't know. Is it considered a preservative in food manufacturing? And Billy, would that be okay if that were the only other ingredient in a value-added product?
Vinegar's not mentioned in the law.
Okay.
So my first thing would be no, that it would make it a value-added product. And I hate to say that, but if I don't see a bright line, then I would be very hesitant about it myself.
It's that preservatives word that is a little bit of a gray area.
Yeah, and we might have an auditor that might agree with a producer that was a preservative, possibly. I couldn't officially tell you that that's okay or not because I've not ever seen that written down like that. Yeah.
So from a food manufacturing, food safety perspective, Danny or Mark, is it typically a preservative, or does it depend on how you're using it?
I think it really depends on how you're using it. I would defer to Mark as the process authority for that to tell us. I mean, it's got a low pH and high acid, so could it? Yes, but you have to be wary also because it's low acid.
Okay.
The short answer for me would be yes. Vinegar is pretty much a preservative for most products.
Awesome. So that is something that folks could work out depending on their product, and then make sure that they can document that somehow for Department of Revenue as needed. It sounds like. That's great. I am seeing that we have answered all of the questions so far. Oh, great. We got another one here. If we want to get a seed oil tested for its contents and characteristics from the seeds we have grown, is there a department we'd go to? Are you looking for nutritional content information? Yes. Any thoughts on that?
It would not be something that the food lab does here now.
Sure. Mark says there is likely a commercial lab that would have some loofah seed oil. Very interesting. A commercial lab, I think we have a list of those actually, or food, some food labs. If you want to email us, then we will try to, that is ringing a bell. That may be something that Bart's department gave me at some time. We'll try to track that down for you. Ah, great question about sales tax considerations for cut flower packaging. When does sales tax come into play if you package those in a paper and string versus a vase or a jar?
Okay. So there's the question and then there's the question. All right. So I don't know too many auditors that are going to go out to cut flower producers and audit you a newspaper versus a piece of other kind of paper so that people don't poke themselves with thorns on roses. I'm pretty sure you'll be okay on that. I think where it gets a little bit weird is when you're selling like actual arrangements of floral arrangements, that type of thing. I'm not saying you can't mix flowers together that you're producing, because clearly you can. They've been produced by you. And if you mix a variety of them together and give them to somebody in paper or something that's of very low value, I don't think anybody's going to have any trouble with that. But, a fancy $100 vase, this is not the same thing. You're putting stuff in actual arrangements and, putting ribbons and things in that nature. And now you look like a lot like a floral shop, you know? So that's the difference. And there's a sense of reasonableness to it that isn't always bright line. But I think if you're using common sense on that, knowing that we're going to also apply the same sort of common sense too, you're going to be fine. And it's a great question. It does not have a black and white answer, and it really kind of depends on what you're doing. But we're probably not going to send the tax police to you to determine the type of paper you're laying your cut flowers in. That's just not a thing. Okay. Hope that
You have a
helps.
few other things to do, don't you?
Yeah, couple things. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
That's right. Well, we've got another question here. So if David is at the farmer's market selling his stuff and other farmers drop off items at his stall to sell for them, and those farmers aren't staying on site, does he need to collect taxes on those? It doesn't sound like he's buying them and reselling. He's kind of selling for somebody else.
No, I don't think so. I think that if your records are kept and if that person's dropping off 50 watermelons as an example, you're going to sell his 50 watermelons for him. You're kind of acting as his agent. Okay. So the sales from those 50 watermelons, I would assume, would go to him, to the other guy. You're going to hand the money back over to them, and you're going to have some kind of agreement or something. You'll have some paperwork or something, that you could explain down on that. I don't think that you're accepting those watermelons in as an inventory item. I think you're doing it as a kind gesture for the producing farmer that would be dropping those off, assuming that they were a producing farmer. But I think that's where you're going with that. And we're fine with that. Just keep up with documentation in case it's ever questioned, that sort of thing. And I think that's where we're going with it. That I don't think that's a true consignment type situation there, because, you're really not acting in that behalf as that person. You're just there as a matter of convenience for that other producing farmer.
Great. Yes. So consignment would be different.
It works a little different. Like if you have a consignment store, where we get the question oftentimes about how do the taxes work in consignment stores. And I won't bore y'all with all that, but there's a process with that where we have to determine who the dealer is and who's responsible for the taxes and who's doing the cashiering and all that other stuff. So I don't really want to go down that road with you because it's sort of boring. But it's it there's a process for that, but I don't think this is what you guys are describing here.
Great. We've got another, I think, food manufacturing wise question here about what to keep in mind with dried herbs or dried roots.
Yep. So just make sure they're thoroughly cleaned, dry them completely before use, store in an airtight container away from moisture, heat, and light. Check regularly for pests or other type of mold. That's really what the things to take into consideration for that.
Great. Would both of those things work under the Tennessee Food Freedom Act?
They would, as long as they're made from your private residence.
Okay. Is there anything in that herb realm that would not? And I'm not sure. I don't. Where does garlic fall, for example? That's one that we get questions about sometime. That's not necessarily a leafy herb, but
yeah, that would be one of those we'd really recommend that you give us a call and let us walk you through with that. There's just way too many variables that could go into place when you start talking about garlic.
Great.
Sure, I'll post the office number in the chat. That way it doesn't get lost.
All right. Do we have to wash eggs before selling at farmers market, or can we put on the label wash before using, and what kind of carton is required? Can we use a Walmart carton, or do we have to have a blank carton?
So there are 3 C's that go with eggs: clean, cold, and in a new carton. So we don't allow for the use of a reuse of a carton. They have to be washed and cleaned, and they have to be kept cold. You can't reuse the Walmart carton. We do recommend that on the carton you can write the name of the farm they came from, and some sort of lot or tracking identifier would be best.
So, Danny, the egg rules in Tennessee have changed off and on quite a ways. So if a farmer has 3,000 hens or less than 3,000 hens and are selling directly to consumers, I think there are fewer rules than that, perhaps. Although food safety wise, you'd certainly want them to do that.
We're still gonna, if we find those eggs for sale in an establishment, we're gonna require those 3 things.
Right, in a food store or things like that.
And the farmer's market as well.
Oh, well, we need to talk about that because we may need to update some information.
Sure.
Oh, all right. Okay, I am showing 4 minutes until 12:30. We do have a question about accountants that are more familiar working with farmers. Are there accountants more familiar with working with farmers? There certainly are. I don't know who they are. However, that's something that you'll want to check around locally for and see. I know there are tax services. If that's the kind of service that you're interested in, Tennessee Farm Bureau has some tax services. Again, we're kind of tossing out ideas here and not endorsing anybody specifically, but certainly in rural areas, there are accountants that would work more, have more experience with farmers than not, but we don't have a list of those. You make a call your county extension office, and they may be able to point you in some directions, although they won't be able to kind of endorse anybody for that as well. If you want to re-listen to this session, all of the recordings are posted on our center's YouTube channel, and I think that link has been in your you can find that on our website under resources. Our YouTube channel is there. It's also on the educational programs page. I've been listing it where we're promoting the sessions and on the and on our Facebook page as well with that listing. So we'd love for you to re-listen, and I'll try to gather some resources from what we've talked about that are available online. I'm not sure I'll get with it today. This is Zoom meeting 2 of 3 for me. So if I don't get it today, I will get it by tomorrow for you online. So I will get that up as absolutely as soon as I can. And I thank you all for being here in person and for being interested in listening again. As we wrap up here, I want to thank our panelists, Mel, Billy, and Danny, and our extra panelist, Mark Morgan, for being with us today, taking time to answer your questions. And I will say all of these folks are dedicated to helping you make your businesses thrive while protecting consumers and meeting the regulations and following the law. So we appreciate the work they do every day and for taking time to be with us today. Thank you for taking time to be with us today. Please fill out that evaluation form for us. That helps us in programming, and also especially if you're wanting TAEP credit, that is helpful to us and helpful to you because it gets you your attendance recorded, and we'll send that on to the Department of Agriculture TAEP group after April 30th when folks finish listening to the recordings as well. And please check out Mark's website in the food science department. They've got some wonderful resources there and ways to contact them for help with the processes and to making sure your products are safe and manufactured well. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Very, very helpful.